In the dark annals of criminal history, few names evoke as much horror and revulsion as Luis Alfredo Garavito Cubillos, known as El La Bestia, the Beast, or El Monstruo de Genova, the Monster of Genova. His reign of terror across Colombia in the 1990s would reveal him to be one of history's most prolific serial killers, with a confirmed victim count that still sends shockwaves through law enforcement communities worldwide. Born on January 25, 1957, in Genova, Quindio, Colombia, Garavito's early life was steeped in the kind of darkness that often precedes monsters. The eldest of 7 children, he endured a childhood marked by extreme poverty and unrelenting abuse. His father, a heavy drinker with a violent streak, would regularly beat young Luis and his siblings. The savage beatings were often accompanied by psychological torture, creating deep-seated trauma that would later manifest in ways too horrific to imagine. But childhood trauma alone cannot explain the depths of depravity to which Garavito would descend. As he grew into adolescence, dark tendencies began to surface. He experienced sexual abuse at the hands of 2 adult men, events that would later become twisted justifications for his own predatory behavior. By his teenage years, Garavito had already begun to exhibit troubling signs of fascination with power, a desire to inflict pain, and an ability to manipulate those around him. The 1990s marked the beginning of Garavito's killing spree, though investigators would only piece this together years later. He developed a hunting pattern that was as methodical as it was sinister. Garavito would transform himself into different personas: a monk, a street vendor, a homeless man, or a country farmer, each disguise carefully chosen to appear harmless and trustworthy to his intended victims, young boys from impoverished backgrounds. His method of approaching victims revealed a predator who understood the vulnerabilities of his prey. Garavito would seek out boys between 6 and 16 years old, often targeting those who lived on the streets or came from extremely poor families. He would offer them small amounts of money, food, or work, playing on their desperation and need. Some victims he promised jobs collecting recyclable materials, others he lured with simple offers of soda or small gifts. Once he had gained their trust, Garavito would lead his victims on long walks, claiming to be taking them to their supposed work location. These walks would intentionally tire the children, making them more vulnerable. When they were sufficiently isolated and exhausted, the true horror would begin. Garavito would bind his victims, subjecting them to torture and rape before finally ending their lives with brutal efficiency, often by cutting their throats. The killer's signature was as distinct as it was disturbing. He would typically restrain his victims with nylon rope, positioning their hands behind their backs. Many bodies were found with signs of bite marks and evidence of sexual assault. Perhaps most chillingly, Garavito would often collect trophies from his victims, their clothing, or personal items which he would later use to relive his crimes. For years, these murders went unconnected. Colombia in the 1990s was a nation grappling with drug cartel violence, guerrilla warfare, and political unrest. The disappearance of street children, sadly, didn't always command immediate attention from authorities. Garavito exploited this reality, moving from town to town across 11 different departments in Colombia, leaving a trail of broken families and unsolved cases in his wake. The breakthrough in the case came in February 1998, when the discovery of a mass grave near the town of Genova set off alarm bells among investigators. The bodies of several young boys were found, all bearing similar wounds and signs of torture. As authorities began to dig deeper, more graves were uncovered across the country. A pattern emerged: the victims were all young boys, all poor, all killed in similarly brutal fashion. Detective Carlos Morales, who would later become one of the key figures in bringing Garavito to justice, noticed something else: many of the crime scenes contained empty bottles of cheap alcohol. This detail would prove crucial, as Garavito was known to drink heavily during his attacks, often leaving behind these inadvertent clues. The investigation gained momentum when police found Garavito's girlfriend, who provided crucial information about his movements across the country. She described a man who would disappear for days or weeks at a time, returning with unexplained mood swings and sometimes blood-stained clothing. Though she hadn't known the extent of his crimes, her testimony helped police track Garavito's movements and correlate them with the dates of disappearances and discovered bodies. In April 1999, Garavito was finally arrested not for murder, but for attempted rape of a young boy. While in custody, investigators began to piece together the enormous scope of his crimes. They discovered a notebook in which Garavito had kept detailed records of his victims, each marked with disturbingly precise notes about their deaths. The notebook would later help police locate more bodies and confirm the identity of numerous victims. During his interrogation, Garavito's confession stunned even the most hardened investigators. He admitted to killing 140 children, though investigators believed the true number could be over 300. His recall of the crimes was precise and emotionless, describing each murder with a detachment that spoke to his complete lack of remorse or human empathy. The details he provided were horrifying. Garavito described how he would often spend days with his victims before killing them, gaining their trust and making them dependent on him. He spoke of how he would watch their faces change from trust to terror when they realized their fate. Most disturbing was his claim that he felt compelled by voices to commit these acts, though psychological evaluations would later suggest he was not psychotic but rather a calculating predator who knew exactly what he was doing. The investigation would eventually reveal that Garavito had killed in at least 59 different municipalities across Colombia. His ability to move undetected for so long was partly due to his unremarkable appearance and chameleon-like ability to blend into different communities. He would often take jobs as a street vendor or handyman, positions that allowed him to observe potential victims while appearing harmless to the community. In December 1999, Garavito was found guilty of 138 counts of murder. The Colombian justice system, which normally carries a maximum sentence of 40 years, was faced with an unprecedented case. The combined sentences for his crimes added up to 1,853 years and 9 days in prison. However, due to Colombian law and his cooperation with authorities, his sentence was reduced to 40 years, and could potentially be further reduced to 22 years for good behavior. The revelation of Garavito's crimes sent shockwaves through Colombian society and prompted calls for reform in how missing children cases were handled. The fact that he had been able to kill so many children over such a long period exposed serious flaws in law enforcement communication and coordination between different regions of the country. Perhaps most disturbing was Garavito's behavior after his conviction. In prison interviews, he displayed an unsettling ability to switch between appearing remorseful and speaking about his crimes with clinical detachment. He claimed to have found religion and expressed desire for forgiveness, yet showed no genuine empathy for his victims or their families. Mental health professionals who evaluated him noted his high intelligence and manipulative nature, describing him as a classic psychopath who understood the magnitude of his crimes but felt no true remorse. The aftermath of Garavito's capture revealed the devastating impact on countless families across Colombia. Many victims remained unidentified, leaving families without closure. Support groups formed among the victims' families, united in their grief and their fight to ensure Garavito would never be released. Their advocacy led to changes in Colombian law regarding crimes against children and how missing persons cases are handled. The case of Luis Garavito serves as a dark reminder of humanity's capacity for evil. His crimes exposed not only the vulnerabilities of society's most defenseless members, but also the systemic failures that allowed such atrocities to continue unchecked for so long. The investigation into his crimes changed how law enforcement in Colombia and across Latin America approach serial crimes, leading to better coordination between departments and more attention to missing children cases. Today, Luis Garavito remains one of history's most prolific confirmed serial killers. His case continues to be studied by criminologists and law enforcement agencies worldwide, seeking to understand how one person could commit such extensive crimes over such a long period without detection. The lessons learned from his capture have influenced how authorities investigate serial crimes and handle cases involving missing children from vulnerable populations. The shadow of La Bestia still looms large over Colombia, a reminder of a dark chapter in the nation's history. For the families of his victims, the pain continues, made worse by the knowledge that due to Colombian law, their children's killer could potentially be released. Their ongoing fight to keep him imprisoned represents not just their personal quest for justice, but society's obligation to protect its most vulnerable members from monsters who walk among us. As Colombia continues to grapple with the legacy of Garavito's crimes, His case serves as a haunting reminder of the importance of protecting society's most vulnerable members and the need for vigilance in detecting and preventing such predatory behavior. The Beast of Colombia may be behind bars, but the impact of his crimes continues to resonate, a dark chapter in criminal history that should never be forgotten, lest similar horrors be allowed to happen again. The story of Luis Garavito stands as a testament to the darkness that can exist within human nature and the vital importance of ensuring that such evil never again finds the space to operate unchecked in the shadows of society. His crimes changed a nation and left scars that may never fully heal, serving as a permanent reminder of the price of ignorance and the cost of failing to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The reverberations of Luis Garavito's crimes continue to echo through Colombia's justice system and collective consciousness. In the years following his imprisonment, new details emerged that painted an even more disturbing picture of his reign of terror, revealing aspects of his crimes that had initially gone unreported. Prison officials who interacted with Garavito noted his peculiar daily routines. He would spend hours meticulously drawing cartoons, innocent-looking characters that stood in stark contrast to his heinous crimes. These drawings, psychological experts suggested, might represent his way of processing his actions, or, more disturbingly, reliving his crimes through a sanitized lens. He maintained a neat cell, was polite to guards, and often spent time reading religious texts, presenting himself as a model prisoner. Yet beneath this facade of rehabilitation, troubling signs persisted. In rare interviews granted to criminal psychologists, Garavito exhibited what experts termed controlled madness, an ability to appear completely normal and even charming while harboring deeply disturbing thoughts and impulses. He would speak about his crimes as if discussing mundane events, showing an emotional detachment that chilled even seasoned investigators. Further investigation into his past revealed additional potential victims. In 2010, Colombian authorities announced they had discovered evidence suggesting Garavito might have killed in Ecuador and Venezuela during his traveling years. These accusations added a new international dimension to his crimes, though these additional murders were never officially confirmed. The methods used to track and capture Garavito revolutionized how Colombian law enforcement approached serial crimes. The case led to the creation of specialized units dedicated to identifying patterns in disappearances and violent crimes across different jurisdictions. The Garavito Protocol, as it became known informally among law enforcement, emphasized the importance of cross-referencing seemingly unrelated cases and paying special attention to crimes against vulnerable populations. Perhaps most chilling were the details that emerged about Garavito's hunting grounds. Investigators mapped his movements across Colombia and discovered he had developed an intricate understanding of areas where children would be most vulnerable. He targeted regions affected by poverty and civil unrest, where police presence was minimal and families might be less likely to report missing children immediately. This calculated approach to selecting his killing fields demonstrated a level of planning that went beyond mere opportunistic violence. The psychological impact on the investigators who worked the case was profound. Detective Carlos Morales, who spent years pursuing Garavito, later admitted in interviews that the case had fundamentally changed him. Looking into the eyes of pure evil, he said, changes something inside you forever. Several members of the investigative team required psychological counseling after working on the case, particularly those involved in excavating the burial sites and interviewing Garavito. As Colombia approached the possibility of Garavito's release due to good behavior and legal technicalities, a movement began among victims' families and civil rights organizations to ensure he would never walk free. They argued that his crimes were crimes against humanity and therefore should not be subject to standard sentencing guidelines. This legal battle highlighted the challenges of dealing with criminals whose actions exceed the scope of conventional justice systems. New testimonies from people who knew Garavito during his killing years emerged, revealing missed opportunities to stop his rampage. A former employer recalled how Garavito would often arrive at work with unexplained scratches and dirty clothes, claiming he had been camping or hiking. Others remembered his unusual interest in young boys, which at the time was dismissed as merely odd behavior, rather than recognized as the warning sign it was. The impact of Garavito's crimes extended beyond Colombia's borders, influencing how other Latin American countries approached the investigation of crimes against children. His case became a standard study in police academies across South America, teaching future law enforcement officers about the importance of recognizing patterns in seemingly unrelated crimes and the value of maintaining detailed records across jurisdictions. In prison, Garavito's behavior continued to fascinate and disturb psychiatric professionals. He developed what appeared to be multiple personas: the religious penitent seeking redemption, the helpful prisoner assisting authorities with unsolved cases, and occasionally, in unguarded moments, glimpses of the monster beneath the mask. These shifting personalities led to debates among mental health professionals about the nature of evil and the limits of human rehabilitation. The discovery of additional evidence in old cases continued years after his imprisonment. Construction projects occasionally uncovered new burial sites, leading to fresh investigations and the identification of more victims. Each discovery reopened wounds in communities affected by his crimes and served as a reminder of the true scope of his murderous campaign. The case also led to significant changes in how missing persons cases involving children were handled in Colombia. New protocols were established requiring immediate investigation of disappearances, regardless of the social status of the family reporting the missing child. This systematic change, though too late for Garavito's victims, has since helped prevent other potential predators from exploiting the same vulnerabilities in the system. As Colombia continues to wrestle with the legacy of La Bestia, his case serves as a dark reminder of the potential for evil that can exist within seemingly ordinary individuals. The story of Luis Garavito remains one of the most disturbing chapters in criminal history, a testament to the importance of vigilance and the need for society to protect its most vulnerable members. The possibility of his eventual release continues to haunt the nation, serving as a rallying point for advocates of judicial reform and victims' rights. The debate over how society should handle criminals of such magnitude whose crimes exceed our normal frameworks for justice and punishment remains unresolved, a philosophical and practical challenge that Garavito's case brought into sharp focus. In the end, the story of Luis Garavito is more than just a tale of unimaginable horror. It is a cautionary narrative about the importance of protecting society's most vulnerable members and the need for constant vigilance against those who would prey upon them. His crimes changed a nation, exposed critical flaws in law enforcement and social services, and left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of Colombia and the world.